Hello viewers, today we're going to try and make the British classic, which we all enjoy at Christmas time, the mince pie. Now the first thing to say is don't worry, this has no meat in it at all. It's a sweet recipe. Originally mince pies did contain lamb meat and they were mixed with alcohol and dried fruit and spices as a preservative, but over time people realised that the meat bit wasn't very nice and they much more preferred the sweet minced meat, so that's what we're going to make today. So we've got to make the pastry and then we've got to make the mincemeat. So the first thing is to make the pastry. So you need to get about 375 grams, or about 3 cups if you're joining us from the USA, of flour. Pour that into a bowl, and then here I've got 260 grams of soft butter, just over 1 cup, and you're going to put that into a bowl and then crumble it until it creates a crumb-like consistency. Now earlier you might have heard me say that mince pies are a great British tradition, but actually the recipe originates from the Middle East. About 800 years ago, the Crusaders from Europe brought back this recipe for mincemeat with fruit, spices and alcohol preserves back from the Middle East into their own cultures. So there you go, a bit of history as we try and make our mince pies today. You're going to add 125 grams, about half a cup of caster sugar and 1 large egg that's been beaten into the mixture, and that will soften it, and then we should be creating the pastry, the short crust pastry for our mince pies. So you're going to take 1 egg, crack it, make sure it's okay, and then using a fork, just whisk that together and slowly put it in your pastry. Then grab, as I say, 125 grams of caster sugar, that's about half a cup, put that in as well. And the first part of this I find is best done with a fork, is just to start folding that egg through, just like that, okay? Now, people have been making mince pies as a Christmas British tradition for many, many years, about 800 years as we just learnt. And that's always happened, apart from a particularly terrible time in the 17th century, that's the 1600s, when the Puritan government, led by Oliver Cromwell, who you might have heard of, when he decided that mince pies were part of a Christmas kind of over-exuberance and part of the Catholic Church, so he banned them. He banned them in the 1600s, about 1647. He decided to ban mince pies, and the British people, they were not happy with this. This culminated in 1648 in Kent, in south east England, with something called the Plum Pudding Riots, where Oliver Cromwell had to dispatch 3,000 men just to make sure that the rioters stopped, because they said, you can't take our Christmas traditions, our mince pies away from us. So there you go. You might think I'm making that up, but I'm not. You can look it up, Plum Pudding Riots. Okay, so we want the pastry to come into sort of 1 ball, 1 lump of pastry, so you might need a wee bit of water. So just grab a bit of water, pour a little bit in, not too much. That'll just loosen the pastry a little bit. And then we want to slowly bring it together in a bowl, leaving nothing on the mixing bowl. This can take a bit of time, you need to be patient. Apparently patience is not my best skill, but there we are. You keep mixing in the pastry until you get it into a ball, a bit like that. Be careful not to overwork it, and then just pop it in some cling film, wrap it up, and that goes in the fridge for about 15 minutes just to chill. Okay, so we've made the short crust pastry. That's in the fridge chilling for about, as I say, 15 minutes. And while that's happening, we can make the mincemeat. Remember, no meat is involved in mincemeat anymore. This is sweet mincemeat. So you can get a jar of mincemeat. This is the 400 gram jar. You can make your own, but you have to then find things like suet, too complicated. So if you can, get a jar of mincemeat. But it doesn't mean you can't zazz it up a bit. So 1 jar of mincemeat. Smells of Christmas. Lemon, zested, already taken the finely grated rind of 1 lemon. Get that in, that'll add a bit of a punch, a bit of a citrus flavour. 1 finely chopped apple, put that in. So these are our own flavours. And then satsumas. Quite what the difference is between a satsuma and a small orange, I'll never know. But they're called satsumas. So 1 finely chopped satsuma, put that in. Then mix it all together and you have your mincemeat that's going to be the filling of the mince pie. Look at that. And as I say, if you had a mince pie before, it really does smell like Christmas. Now, as our medieval friends from 800 years ago knew, mincemeat, what's in it, it preserves everything. So you can make this and keep it in the fridge for as long as you want, really, as long as it's in a sealed jar. So you can make this beforehand and then just roll out the pastry and fill it in. Well, 3 of the ingredients, the cinnamon, the cloves and the nutmeg, are said to represent the 3 gifts that Eastern kings gave to Jesus at his birth. Whether or not that's true or not, who knows? But here we are, we have our mincemeat. Let's see how the dough's doing. Okay, so the pastry's had about 15-20 minutes in the fridge just to cool off. I've just turned the oven on. You want the oven on at about 200 degrees Celsius, which is about 390-400 degrees Fahrenheit. You will need a muffin baking tray, a bit like this. I greased it and topped it. I learned from my grandma. Get a bit of flour. We're going to need a lot of this. And this is the bit that can get a little bit messy. Just get a bit of flour and just sprinkle it over the tray. Okay, don't worry about doing too much. That's fine, just sprinkle it in, no problem at all. And that just makes sure that the mince pies don't stick to the bottom. And also, if you've got too much butter in there, it just kind of can burn on the bottom and you don't want that. So we've got our pastry, and what you want is you want some pastry for the bottom of the mince pies and some pastry for the lid. So take about 2/3 of it, I would say, about 2/3, which will be for the bottom, and just place 1/3 just out the way for the minute for the top, okay? So this is the messy bit. Get some flour, okay? Generously put flour all over your work surface. I've got a chopping board here, okay? Make sure it's on the pastry and try and just initially get it into a rectangle, okay? Just by pushing it down, and then the fun bit, we're gonna start rolling. So what we want in the end is we want the pastry to be about the same size as this chopping board. Okay, so we start rolling it out. Remember, keep moving it. Remember, because we've put this in the fridge, it's nice and cool, so you need to work fairly quickly, okay? So we'll keep going until it's about 3mm thick. You don't need to use a ruler, just guess. You know what thin pastry is meant to be. Right, the fun bit. Cutters. You need 2 cutters. One needs to be slightly bigger than the other. If you don't have these, don't worry. You can use an upturned cup. That will work. A glass, an egg cup, anything you want will work for this. We're going to use the cutters to cut out our circles, okay? Make sure you try and use as much of the pastry as possible. It saves you from having to re-roll it, okay? And we want 12 of these. We've got our 12 pastry cases, and what you're going to do is just put these in the base, just push them with your fingers of each of these muffin tins. We've got our 12 pastry cases or pastry bottoms. We're then going to put a bit of mincemeat in each one. You don't want to be too frugal with the fillings. You want to be generous, but you don't want them overflowing. It's really just trial and error. So just put the spoon in, use your hands. Once you've filled each of the cases, just break an egg up, whisk it up, and then you're just going to put a little bit of egg round the side of each one, just round the side of the lid, so the lid has somewhere to stick, okay? Okay, we're nearly ready. Now we have to, of course, make the lid. So, remember this fellow? I'm not going to forget about him. That is the lid for our mince pies. So, same thing again, really. Now, remember our two cutters? We're going to get the smaller cutter and cut out, you've guessed it, 12 lids. So let's do 12. You've got to be a little bit careful here. So you're just going to slightly push them together on each side. Okay, look at that, really nice shape. There we go, 12 mince pies in a baking tin. But we're not quite finished yet. Do you remember that egg glaze we had earlier? We're going to get that back, just mix together, and just very lightly, a bit of egg glaze on each one just gives it a really nice texture on the top once it bakes. Okay, just do each one. You can either get scissors or a knife. I'm going to use scissors and just chop 2 small slits in the top of each one. You don't have to be too exact about this. We're going to cover them in icing sugar at the end anyway. And now, in the oven, 15 to 20 minutes. So I've just taken the mince pies out of the oven. As you can see, some of the mincemeat has come out and caramelised. That's fine. Just leave them to cool for about 10 minutes and then we'll empty them and then we can enjoy them. So the mince pies have been left to cool and now you can just use a knife and just take them out and finish their cooling on a cooling rack. Now, what you can do is you can eat these right now if you want to. They're still slightly warm, or you can put them in a Tupperware container, seal it, and then just about 10 minutes before you eat them, put them in the oven, maybe even the microwave, just heat them up. They're really, really nice warm. We're going to have these now, so what I'm going to do, I've got a little bit of icing sugar here. I'm going to put a bit of icing sugar in this sieve, and you can just finish them off like that. So there we are, the great British tradition of mince pies. I think they look pretty good. Mince pies, you can eat them cold, you can eat them hot, you can eat them on their own, you can eat them with cream, you can eat them with custard, or like I used to do when I was a child, I used to put one on a plate, leave it at the bottom of the chimney on Christmas Eve for Father Christmas. The mince pie, a great British tradition. So you can now have a go. I'll be very impressed if you can make them. They are really good.